cambridge.org/academic2021. That's the address that you need to check out all the talks. But let's now hand over to Peter and I think meet everybody on the panel. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Simon, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining online. Thanks of you who are also on Facebook, because we're live streaming on Facebook as well. So welcome to the Cambridge Online Academic Conference. Simon mentioned a few countries. I actually just counted 26 different countries from as far apart as Brazil and New Zealand and up to Sweden and down to Oman. So this is truly a global audience today. Right, so let's do some introductions. I'm just going to go around my screen as I'm seeing everybody. So Hayo, perhaps a few words from you to begin, please. You're on mute, Hayo.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Greetings from New Zealand. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Hayo. And underneath on my screen, we've got Alexander.
Oh, hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. So I'm here in sunny Thailand, in Salaya, Thailand, just to the west of the Chao Phraya River. So welcome.
Yeah, and welcome to you, Alexander. And then next on my screen is Dr. Mansour.
Hi, well, good afternoon, good morning your time, good afternoon my time. I'm here from Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. Glad seeing you all.
Thank you, Dr. Mansour. And just above you is James.
Good evening from Japan. I'm looking forward to the talk and listening to what everyone has to say.
Okay, and to your right, James, is Craig.
Good evening from me, good evening, because it's 10 o'clock at night here, or good afternoon or good morning. I'm speaking from Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Nice to join you.
Thanks, Craig. And finally, Mona.
Hello, good morning, everyone, from Cairo, Egypt, sunny Cairo, Egypt, the land of the pyramids. And good afternoon or good evening to anyone and everyone everywhere. It's good to see you, and I'm very happy to be with you today.
Great, thank you very much, Mona. So like our audience, we have a truly international panel from all over the world as well. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so let's start with some basic Ask Me Anything questions. And as this is an academic English conference, I think it would make sense to make sure that we understand what academic English actually is and how that differs from ESP, English for specific purposes. So any hands up? Would anybody like to take the first one to tell us the difference between academic English and ESP? Specifically, this is from Yasmin in India, but we had many similar questions from people around the world. Any virtual or real hands from our experts?
I'll get started if no one else
Okay,
wants to.
Craig, go for it.
Okay, so for me, the difference is, I guess in terms of skills work, there's a greater emphasis on reading and writing in EAP. There are differences in language, obviously. There is academic language as opposed to general English. So there's a different register, different vocabulary, different grammar that you might be focusing on. Things, noun phrases, for example, are more prevalent in academic language. And generally, there's often a little bit more kind of complexity in ideas and this kind of ultimate aim of trying to render quite complex ideas in a manageable, understandable way. There's still often social interaction in EAP because there are kind of pastoral care issues associated with EAP in terms of talking to different people to get help, etc. So that doesn't go away. And I guess there's, in terms of topics, obviously you're dealing with topics that are a little bit more serious and perceived as being more academic. So you're not talking about, I don't know, going shopping, but you might be talking about, say, the environment more frequently in an EAP course. So that's kind of how I would see the difference as a teacher.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's very clear. So would you say, okay, Mona, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, just one little thing, that ESP is basically preparing for, teaching language for a certain specific vocation or occupation.
Okay.
Yeah. So the jargon is not the jargon that we'd use writing a research paper, let's say, but it's more of something that you would need if you're working in a certain job or a certain career or a certain occupation. I know that ESP is divided into EOP, English for occupational purpose, or EVP for a vocation. That's again a big difference between both. But academic English is what you'd need to succeed maybe in university, or maybe later on if you're publishing something.
Okay, you mentioned, Mona, different occupations. Can you give us a few examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I was thinking, like, for instance, here in I teach at AUC, at the American University in Cairo.
Yeah.
We have the Department of Rhetoric and Composition and the Department of English Language Instruction, and we teach academic English. But one of the courses we offer is English for business students, or English for engineering students, or English for biology students, let's say. So it's the English they would need to write a report if they're working in the finance sector, for instance.
Okay,
so
great.
It's slightly different than just writing a research paper for academic purposes.
Thanks, lovely. Dr. Mansour, your hand is up, I think.
If I just may add something, thank you very much, Peter and everybody. Well, I would say it's also, ESP is not only for non-academic purposes. ESP is also, I mean, could be for academic purposes. So when we say EAP, we know that it's for some academic context, including colleges and universities. But at the same time, within that domain, we also have courses called ESPs, which is for different majors. Usually ESP courses come after students achieve a certain competency level, which is usually like B1 or something. So I would say it helps and serves both purposes within the academic institutions as well as outside.
Okay, so would you say then that EAP is a broader term, whereas ESP goes into specific, obviously because of ESP, but into specific occupational areas?
Well, I would say yes. Occupational for academic purposes at the same time, it can help for that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Mansour. James, your hand is up, and then I'll come back to Craig.
I won't try to add to the excellent definitions
go
so
on,
far,
go
but
on.
I will give an example from what I did at my previous university.
Right.
I was teaching aviation students, future pilots, at my old school.
Right.
And in class, we'd be preparing them for the TOEFL IBT. So especially the writing section. So we were teaching them specific skills for academic writing skills and things like that. Outside of that class, I was teaching an extracurricular activity with them on ESP, which is more pilot specific vocabulary and different situations they might find themselves in, say, their pilot test or whatnot. So academic, of course, being how to write, ESP being this is what we'll use for your job. So that's what I was doing before.
Yeah, that's clear. Okay. Craig, did you want to come in with something before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that often in the literature, a distinction is made between general English for academic purposes and specific English for academic purposes. So, for example, in some EAP programs, you've got students who are going to be going on to do business or science or tourism, a whole range of things after they finish their EAP course. So that would be a general English for academic purposes course. Whereas if everyone in your EAP class is going to be studying engineering, well, then you have the opportunity of doing specific English for academic purposes, which focuses on engineering, which is kind of what Mona was saying, where she has different students in different faculties and she's able to kind of tailor for that. So there is that also that distinction within the EAP, which we've kind of teased out, but then ESP would include also, say, to my mind, would also include something like business English, which had nothing to do with academic language whatsoever.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Just before we move on, I see Layla has joined us. Hello, Layla. Nice to see you. I think you're on mute.
Mute. There. Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you too. Layla, just very quickly, because everybody else has quickly introduced themselves, just tell us where you are. And
okay, so I'm Layla Kamal. I'm an English language instructor at the American University in Cairo, and I work with Mona Al-Saadi. Okay. And we are very interested, of course, anything to do with academic English, and I hope we will enjoy our little workshop on motivation tomorrow.
Lovely. You're very welcome, Layla.
Thank you very much.
Just one little addition. I teach at 11:30, so I'll leave at 11:30 and Layla will take over.
Okay. Just make it seamless.
Yes.
Okay, there is, we'll move on from the basics, but there is just one follow-up question, which I think is quite important. This is from somebody called Belkas in Turkey, who says, can the teaching of academic English be incorporated into teaching starting at lower levels? And Chao Ming in Taiwan says, is a certain level of language proficiency required for EAP? So this is talking about, you know, what level realistically can we start moving away from general English and into something more specific or even academic? Anybody like to have a go at that question? Hayo, your hand is up, your virtual hand, and then Craig, I saw yours, and Dr. Mansour. Okay.
Yes,
Hayo.
sure. I do think that a certain minimum level of proficiency is required. I mean, EAP being, of course, the language that you need to be successful in an academic context, and ESP being the language that you need to be successful in a professional context, like a work environment. And obviously, those kind of presuppose that you have a minimum level of requirement to be able to operate in those types of situations. Having said that, you can never start too early to prepare learners for their future lives, whether that is academic or professional. But at the same time, you do want to have a minimum level of general English proficiency before you start moving into those more kind of specialized areas, shall we say.
So you know what my next question is going to be, don't you? What's the level? Approximately, what would you say?
Level is approximately very good.
I mean, historically, historically, I mean, if you go back about 15 years or so ago, the kind of accepted level for EAP was often B2, upper intermediate. That was kind of, often it was sort of perceived that you did general English and then you transitioned on to at that upper intermediate level to EAP. But what increasingly was happening with students at lower level who knew that they did want to study academic English, there was immense pressure from them to get underway earlier. And I think that this kind of need that students have had has actually pushed the level down. And so, for example, the Unlock series of EAP books actually begins at A1. So the kind of language that they're focusing on is, in terms of the grammar and the vocabulary, it's not significantly different from general English, but the kind of the topics are just a little bit more serious. But a lot of the language areas are similar to general English. But I mean, I very much agree with Hayo that it really helps if learners have got some degree of sort of competence in terms of their ability to enter an EAP program. But there is this student pressure to get started early.
Yeah. So would you say, Craig, then at lower levels, it's probably more about context? That's where the difference is between academic and general English. It's where often, John and Mary are talking rather than what.
A little bit context, but also I guess you are focused. I think low-level EAP courses probably focus on reading and writing more than a general English would, which would focus more on particularly on spoken language. So you'd find a greater quantity of reading and writing at those B1 levels than you might say in general English.
Yeah. Okay, great. Dr. Mansour, I think you wanted to say something to add. You're on mute, Dr. Mansour.
Well, exactly, just like what been mentioned by experts here. I think certain levels are required for students to achieve before going into those specialized courses. I would say, from experience in different language courses in the kingdom, we always put like kind of entry level for students before going into the AAP or the ESP. So I would say what's the level required for going into an academic English course. I think end of level A2 level, something between A2 and B1, of course. That will lead them to a successful journey doing an academic course.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think we've established what the differences are and what the sort of entry level is. So let's move on to an area which I'm sure we've all learned an enormous amount about in the last 18 months or so, technology. And quite a large variety of questions which have come in from people literally all over the world. And I think the first one is a very common one, and one that we've probably all suffered over the during the recent pandemic. This is from Tazia in Indonesia, who asks what is the best practice for teachers and students with limited or no internet connection. I guess the question is really, if you've got to do it online, what can you do if the technology is not really there to support you? I'm sure there isn't a simple answer to this, but anybody like to jump in? Yes, Alexander, you were quick.
Oh, well, great. I was waiting for an opportunity. We have quite a panel of experts. Actually, there's a lot to say. But for this, and I really appreciate this question, it's a very thoughtful question. When we're forced online, so what we're doing now is not really online education exactly. It's more emergency remote teaching, just providing continuity and doing the best we can. So I very much understand where this question is coming from. But really, this might mean educating students more about what they can do even without the support of the teacher. So there are certain activities that they can do on their own. There are certain ways that they can practice with their peers. So really, if we have limited contact with them and we can't always be there to coach them, really one of the best things we can do is educate them about things they can do independently. And actually, one of my favorite books on this topic is Paul Nation's. It's actually a free book. What do you need to know to learn a foreign language? So you can Google it, free book. And actually that does give several examples of activities students can do on their own. And he actually got started, I think, in the 1970s teaching in Indonesia, maybe in a similar context, very little internet at that time. So that would be one approach.
Can you give us a couple of examples, Alexander, of what you mean?
Sure. So for example, for reading, right, to increase your reading fluency, getting some text, reading them over and over again, looking up words and reading them to build fluency. That's another part of that book that I really love, the focus on fluency and the four strands approach to language learning. Things like, even some of the basic things. Flashcards. Again, sometimes we lose sight with all the technology we have.
Definitely.
We have Quizlet and we have Kahoot and we have all these things, but sometimes the tried and true methods, there's nothing wrong with doing flashcards, and you certainly don't need internet access to do that.
Alexander, could you just give the name of the book again, Paul Nation's book, because a lot of people are asking. Maybe Simon or Katie, you could put it in the chat box for us.
Great. It's a wonderful book. It's What Do You Need to Know to Learn a Foreign Language. It's a free book. Paul Nation published it, available as a PDF for free. Very, very highly recommended. There's a list of 20 activities you can do. Some require, role play. Obviously, you need at least one other person to work with, but many you can do on your own. So that's a great resource for those of you maybe who are looking for something to do with limited internet access. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Okay, that's in the chat box now, if anybody wants to. Leila, I think you wanted to ask something?
Yes, I think a very good way would be to encourage them to meet and talk in the target language, whatever the language they want, among themselves. They can play games, they can meet, just have discussions, conversations, and even have fun, go to whatever they want to do. But they can do it trying to speak in English if it's the English they're learning. I think that would be a very, very good exercise for them.
I think something that I learned very quickly is teachers are trying to replicate the classroom online, and as Alexander said, that just doesn't work. So I think teachers need to be brave enough to say, okay, time out, go away, do something asynchronously, do something offline, and then come back. Okay, great. Let's stick with technology. Shabira in India, great question here, because even where I am based in Cyprus, I know this is going on. We're supposed to have both offline and online teaching simultaneously, as half of the students are called to the school and the rest attend live streaming. What should be the strategy to ensure that both the groups are involved? I think you'd be a billionaire if you knew the answer to that question, but anybody like to have a go? Hayo, your hand's up first, I think.
Yes, well, I don't have the answer to that question. I would like the $1 billion though, if you have.
Sure. I thought you might.
I think the experiences so far. I mean, look, all of us are new to this particular situation. We've had blended learning, we've had flipped learning, we've had online learning, all of them for well on 20 years now. But a situation where we're having to mix learning and have learners who are either online or are with us physically in the classroom at the same time is a really new situation for, I would say, 99% of all teachers around the world. We have some experience now from the last 18 months with countries going in and out of lockdowns and some parts of the population having to stay at home and others going to the classroom. And some of the initial experiences seem to point to one, at this stage, rather clear experience, which is that if you are in the unfortunate situation where you have learners physically and virtually with you, at this point, the best solution appears to be to offer different types of activities for both types of groups. Do not, at this point, maybe in 12 months we'll come up with different solution, but at this point, do not try to have these learners engage in the same activities at the same time in the same space. So you'll probably need to think of ways of dividing maybe the day into different parts or coming up with different activities for different groups of students.
So it's almost like differentiating, but differentiating for a different reason, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Layla, I think you want to say something?
I think that Google Docs may come in quite nicely there because both groups can work on Google Docs together, I think.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
that's one way out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Or Zoom for that matter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. James.
Just saying, I've had this situation come up recently, and I tried a couple different things. One, I actually set up an iPad in the classroom, like looking up at me like as if they were in the classroom. It didn't work very well, honestly. They didn't seem very engaged. They didn't feel like part of the class like I was hoping for. What I did end up doing was we used Moodle. I think Google Classroom and things like that is also great. Google Docs is a great resource. But we used Moodle, and as Hayo said, I had to treat it differently. The kids in the classroom, we were doing one activity, sharing all the same information through Moodle, of course, being there available after class, different times through Teams or whatnot. So if they did have questions, I could meet with them face-to-face virtually. But yeah, the things on Moodle, everything would be turned in for the online students, but of course, handed in the class for the face-to-face students. So yeah, separate but equal sounds terrible, but in this case is what we kind of did.
Yeah, I guess it's trial and error, isn't it? It's finding out what works in your particular situation. Yeah. Well, let's do one more on technology. Sorry, Craig, go on. I wasn't expecting Craig for you to want to say anything about technology.
Well, yeah, I'll start by saying I have absolutely no experience of doing this in a practical way, but I have spoken to teachers here in New Zealand who have had the experience. I agree with Hayo that the preferred scenario is actually not to try and combine them. But what I have heard is that a lot of teachers are not being given that opportunity, that they're having to manage this situation where they can't split, and they're having to do it at the same time because the institution is requiring that. So, and I think that is what this teacher here is kind of asking about. And I've never done this, but the thought that sort of came to mind when I read that comment is to actually, if you do have to integrate the two groups, well then try and systematically integrate them as much as you possibly can if you have the technology to do it. So therefore, if you're doing doing an activity where there are small groups of say 4 or 6 students, make sure that you have some online and some in-class students actually working together. And then also perhaps try and set up sort of buddy situations so that they work on sort of a project outside of the lesson. They would obviously have to do this online. But the thing is, I think it would be very easy, particularly for the online group, to feel marginalized in some way. And I think it's probably really important to try and pull those learners in as much as you possibly can and make them feel that they are part of the face-to-face lesson, and not let them feel that they're excluded.
Okay, it certainly sounds like as if you have done it actually yourself, Craig, from that.
I haven't, I've just heard. This is all secondhand. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask one final question, if I may, on technology, because I think it's a really good question. This is from Marco Antonio in Ecuador, and he's feeling very positive and looking to the future. And his question is, what should we keep from what we've learned about online lessons once we're all back in the classroom? So rather than what have we learned in the classroom we can use online, he says the other way around. Let's look to the future. What can we take from online but when we go back into the classrooms? Mona first, and then Alexandra, and then James.
One thing that we enjoy doing online now and we're keeping is individual conferences with the students.
Right.
So we teach writing and we give weekly conferences with the students, and sometimes, and the conferences are scheduled outside class time. And sometimes it's very difficult to find slots that suit everyone because students have other courses besides our course.
Of course, yeah.
So now we're giving the conferences on Zoom, and they can do it from the comfort of their homes, and it's a one-on-one, and it's exactly like having them in our office, but it's scheduled at a time that's very convenient to both of us and the students. So
right.
I think this is one thing we're keeping.
Okay, a lovely example. Yeah, great. Alexander?
Well, sure. And actually following up on something that Craig was saying earlier about students feeling marginalized and so on, I think during this crisis, we're much more aware than we were in the past about, say, well-being, mental health, some of these things. And really, that's something I hope that we can take moving forward, where we're thinking of students as people and thinking of, well, not only why are they not into the language teaching, but what's wrong? Is there something where maybe we need to alert someone or something?
Right,
we can talk to them again one-on-one. Also, though, some technical things. I mean, I'm almost positive for us when we get back into the classroom, we'll be doing a lot more typing and a lot less handwriting.
Yes.
And this goes into the academic English thing as well. I mean, we're preparing students for university. I think the last time I had to submit something that was handwritten was 2008. Everything I do is typed. And thankfully, because my handwriting is nothing to write home about. But I think that we'll be using, say, exam.net even in the classroom to do typed essays rather than handwritten essays.
Yeah.
A lot more Google Docs. So yeah, I think there's some technical things as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. James, and then Dr. Mansour.
When it comes to bad handwriting, I feel your pain. I have terrible handwriting. Two things, we just moved back face-to-face last week. Last week. And two things I'm keeping from my online on-demand online classes is turning in homework online. It's a time saver for me. I used to keep a ton of papers in my office. Doing it online is so much nicer. The grades are there, the homework's there. If I don't have to worry about losing papers or anything like that.
Yeah,
the second thing I'm doing is since all of my students are face-to-face now, and the only time they miss it, I've had a couple students miss classes because of the vaccine, their second shot, they didn't feel too well.
Right.
Back up everything online. So I'm still using Moodle just as much as I did before we went back face-to-face, but everything that I do in class, every handout, every page that we cover, any kind of slides for the presentation is always going to be online. So those are two things that have made my life a little bit easier, even though we're back to face-to-face now.
Yeah. Okay, great. And Dr. Mansour?
Well, I think what we should keep from our online experience is our innovative profession development practices. I think shifting the whole profession development experience to be fully online was actually been one of the things that we should keep and we should develop and keep working on. We all know that, high stake qualifications, just like CELTA and Delta and other similar qualifications are now fully online. Wouldn't have had the same experience, wouldn't be possible to do the same thing without having it fully online. So keeping PD practices online, that's one of the things that would definitely be the same. And of course, other practices that just been mentioned by other colleagues as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. So it's not all negative, is it? There's some really good positive things that have come out of the situation we've been forced into. Okay, let's move on to language skills, and question from Moin in Saudi Arabia. Do you use scaffolding strategies in your writing classroom? If yes, which strategies are more useful than others? Moin doesn't mention if it's online or face-to-face. So I guess you can take that whichever way. So what are the scaffolding strategies that we should be using in the writing classroom? Anybody? Okay, Leila.
If I understand what he means by scaffolding, is building up on materials.
I think so, yeah.
In this situation, what we do is if it's in writing, we would teach introductions and then outlining and then conclusions and transitions and, you know, in whatever order. I'm not putting in the correct order maybe, but that's what we would do. And then we would build up all that into a complete essay. So if this is what is meant by scaffolding, that's what we do bit by bit until they reach the full thing.
Okay. So I think what Moin is asking about is how do we support learners with their writing? So I think the examples you've given will answer that question. Any other comments on scaffolding strategies? Yes, Craig.
One thing I think is that students, I mean, a lot of students find speaking easier. And I always think it's nice if you can actually get learners to talk about what they're going to write before they actually write it. So, I mean, obviously this is things like brainstorming for essays or reports or case studies or whatever, but even things like summaries. I mean, getting students to actually do an oral summary in pairs before they actually come to write it. So you scaffold it from spoken language, which I think they find a little bit easier before they actually have to come to write something. The other thing that I often find that with a lot of writing activities, in a lot of teaching resources that I've seen, learners often go from looking at an example text and analyzing that to having to produce a text. Right. And what I would call scaffolding is giving some kind of controlled practice activities where students are just writing like 1 or 2 sentences, or I mean, even maybe simple gap fills or grammar transformation activities of some kind before they actually move on to try and use new language in a written text. So, I mean, these are kind of fairly old-fashioned ideas, I think. But sometimes I think that they're sort of left out, and that's what I try to do to try and scaffold where learners are finding writing challenging.
Yeah, I don't think just because they're old that they're not necessarily still applicable. I think, you know, all of the things you've mentioned, this whole idea of guided writing is just as relevant today as it was in the past. A couple more questions on writing. This is from Ali, also in Saudi Arabia. I think this is probably a very common challenge which many teachers face. And Ali says, how do we deal with a situation where the level of writing tasks is actually higher than students' abilities? So we're asking them to do something which they're probably not linguistically capable of doing. Any suggestions? Yes, Leila.
We have a writing center here, which helps students who are below the level required. And they can go there as often as they want to, and they can get all the help they need.
Okay, so what sort of help is provided, Leila?
They have one-to-one teachers, and each one has his own specific area of weakness, and they can deal with them individually.
Okay, any other ideas? Yes, Alexander.
Well, absolutely. And this also does go back to the idea of scaffolding that we were just talking about. I mean, obviously, the lower the level, maybe the more scaffolding we can give. And by the way, I love Craig's suggestions, and I would totally agree. Just because they're old doesn't mean we shouldn't do them. And we do have some new tools, though, like, for example, VoiceThread. We've been using that for just exactly what you were describing, giving spoken summaries of things before they write. And that can be asynchronous as well, which is useful. But maybe building on what we were just hearing about the Writing Center, one thing that can be really useful is if you have, say, some students who are very advanced and some students who are at a lower level. Sometimes when you set them up for peer assessment, peer comments, for example, on their essays, you can set it up where one student maybe is more advanced and they're kind of in a more of a teacher or a coaching kind of role. Which really is beneficial for both people. But so setting up, carefully selecting the peers, maybe the instinct might be to put lower level students together, but often you can get really good results by mixing the levels with clear roles.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Alexander. Any other comments about writing and how we can help students? If not, we'll move on to critical thinking. So, again, a really lovely question. This is from Riwadi. Sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly. Riwadi from Thailand, who asks if it's possible for weaker learners to do critical thinking in their English class. James, hands straight up for critical thinking.
Yes, yeah. As I mentioned in my presentation earlier today, I am a critical thinking enthusiast.
Yes.
So, yes, 100% yes. You might be limited on how they express their critical thinking, and you might be limited on how deeply you can go into, say, something like logical fallacies. But an example from my presentation earlier today, even our basic level students, we introduced 4 different logical fallacies to them, but we didn't call them, say, ad populum, which is, we called it everyone's doing it. So you can change the language and introduce things in an easier way for them to understand it and still get the gist of what they're trying to see. Earlier question, which kind of ties into this from my presentation, was, can lower level students do critical thinking or from different cultures? So of course, it's a human thing.
Yeah.
Everyone in the world, any human, can do critical thinking. It starts from very, very basic executive function in the brain and develops over time through experiences and things that we learn that we probably shouldn't do sometimes. And it develops into critical thinking. So no matter what the level, please don't be scared to introduce critical thinking into your classroom. I would really encourage it.
Perhaps the question really is about how we can help weak students to express what they've thought about in English. I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Because I guess, yes, everybody can think critically, whether it's in Arabic or whatever, but how can they actually express what they've thought? Any ideas on that?
Scaffolding and skeletons, things like that, give them a blank to fill in with their opinion.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. So
yeah, okay. Anybody want to add anything to that? Yes, Craig, and then Alexander. Sorry, Alexander. Go on, Craig.
No, I was just thinking that often a place that I start with very low level learners with this is getting them to kind of personalize information and draw on their own experience, and then teasing out the fact that different people in the class have had different experiences or a different reaction, and saying, okay, oh look, we've got different points of view here. So, if we wanted to present this argument, would we just present one person's point of view or another person's point of view? The other thing that I like doing is at lower level, and I suppose it's like the lower order skill of applying knowledge into that lower order skill, is to get them doing sort of problem solving activities, because often maybe the language with those, if they're kind of practical problems initially, they're not too complex in terms of the linguistic demands that they would put on students. But sort of starting in those kinds of ways, which are personalization, applying knowledge, problem solving, before you sort of move on to these more complex ways of critical thinking when you're looking for logical fallacies in text and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Alexander, did you want to say something at the end there?
Well, yeah, 2 things very briefly. So first of all, I would really emphasize, not only can lower level students do critical thinking, but really maybe it's even more important for lower level students. I think sometimes there's this assumption, or this maybe, this mistaken assumption among teachers, where if someone doesn't speak the language proficiently, we lower the level of the tasks, the level of critical thinking or of any kind of thinking required. And really, if there's nothing that's worth explaining, sometimes it really takes away that motivation in the students. So I would really emphasize, not only can they should. Also, another thing is, I think we can really draw on students' ability to use technology. We're doing some projects in our intensive English program, again, of B1 level students, where they're making videos and explaining some differences between Thailand and other ASEAN countries. But they get really creative with the images they put in, right? Some of the media that they put in. And for them, that's not actually that much work. They do that in their social life anyway. So depending on your students, if they have really good technology skills, you can draw on that as well to as an additional tool they can use to express their ideas.
Yeah, Hayo and then James.
Yeah, I just like to quote Booker's law: an ounce of application is worth a ton of abstraction. So that
Right.
goes exactly to what you were just saying, Alexander, that,
Yeah.
you know, our learners, if you give our learners the tools, the opportunities, the chance to just, you know, put their ideas, their thoughts, their experiences into practice in some way, you're actually giving them a chance to live out that critical thinking that you're talking about. So rather than presenting it as something that is different and strange and outside of their everyday lives, actually
Right.
show them
Yeah.
that they are
Yeah.
constantly engaged in critical thinking, and then work from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Haya. And over to James again.
Just quick, I want to go back to what Craig touched on earlier with the lower order thinking skills. A lot of people down the chat were popping up, or how do I do that?
Yes.
And a good way to start is through Bloom's taxonomy. If, as Craig said, you can start low in the lower order thinking skills and work up toward the higher echelons of stuff where you're evaluating, creating, judging, things like that. And that does support critical thinking skills. So if you are looking to introduce critical thinking skills that you haven't done before, take a look at Bloom's taxonomy, look at the verbs that are associated with Bloom's taxonomy, and I think you'll have a good starting place.
Yeah. And another question which keeps coming up, and I'm reading it, is critical thinking only about reading skills? I think there is probably a misconception that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. So
it touches everything in our lives.
Yeah. Can you give us a bit more detail, James?
Yeah, sure. Well, reading, of course, critical thinking, you want to, reading, say, an advertisement. Advertisements are rife with logical fallacies to try and make you think or do a certain thing. If you recognize what it is, you can make a better judgment if you want to do something or not. Reading, when it comes to texts or books or newspapers, of course, you need to dive deeper. And when it comes to critical thinking, look at sources, look at motivations by the author and things like that. But critical thinking also plays into doing an interview for a job, meeting new people, meeting strangers, talking to someone on the plane. You are using critical thinking to get deep or dive deeper into a topic, or dive deeper into get information from someone. Spoken, written, listening, any kind of productive activity can use critical thinking.
Okay, great. I'm looking at my clock and I think we're actually almost out of time. So Simon, I've still got some more questions, or do you want to use the Q&A, or can we have a bit more time?
We'll keep going, like? I think.
Keep going.
I think we're absolutely fine because, yeah, I think we've got an hour, so I'd just keep going. I think there's lots of questions coming in. There's a lot more that we could go on for quite a long time. But
yes, I think we probably could. Yeah. Here's a nice question from a teacher called Peter in the UK. Not me, I promise, because I'm in Cyprus anyway. But what pedagogical strategies or approaches could you recommend for an earlier career EAP tutor regarding the teaching of lecture listening? So we've moved from critical thinking to listening now. Any ideas to help Peter in the UK? No hands up yet. Yes.
Okay.
Craig, go for it.
What I would suggest is, particularly if you're getting started with lower level learners, if they've not actually done a lot of EAP listening before, and you're both new, you and the learners, is start with manageable chunks. I mean, a lot of lectures can be very long, and that's if students have just been listening to kind of conversations in a shop for the past year, and suddenly be plunged into a long lecture could be a little bit a bit too much of a challenge. The other thing is initially just focusing on comprehension rather than moving straight to note taking. I mean, again, this sort of idea of scaffolding the nature of the task so that you don't kind of dive deeply into the task. But the other thing that I think is quite good, John Field, who's written a lot on listening, there's a Cambridge University Press book of his, whereas he does actually suggest, as well as listening to longer stretches of language, taking very small excerpts and getting learners to try and understand, absolutely every word. So very detailed bottom-up listening, so that you actually have this top-down as well as bottom-up, and use them both together. So often I will play a lecture and then just focus on a very short excerpt and almost do a dictation. The other thing to do, I think, with listening is occasionally, once students have understood the content, is also use it as a model for phonology. So listen to the way that the lecturer is using tone and stress to make points clear to the listener, to show when different parts of the lecture are taking place, because this also has a payback in terms of learners. If they're having to do academic presentations, the lectures can act as a model. So those are what I would tell a teacher if they're kind of starting out, and particularly with a lower level group.
Okay, yeah, that's very useful. Thank you. Leila?
TED Talks can come in very useful there, because you've got different kinds of TED Talks, different levels, different accents, and different time given to each talk. So you can choose something suitable for your students, and they can come very handy for note-taking and understanding, comprehension, and so on. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other comments? Okay. Nice question from Maria in Italy. We sort of answered it earlier. Craig sort of answered it, but Maria's question is, has academic English changed in the last 20 years? Yeah, Alexander.
Sure, well, like our language is continually changing, right? So we have seen some evolution. I think for academic language, it has become maybe more inclusive, a bit less sexist, as has language in general, I would say. It still can be in some cases and needlessly complex, perhaps.
Right.
But even that, I think it is edging towards being more readable. We're seeing a lot more non-native English-speaking teachers, for example, who are writing excellent articles. I think the future actually is with non-native English-speaking teachers, and many of whom I think in our panel and audience, we have a lot of great people here. So no, in some ways, I would say yes, it is changing, and I think it's probably changing for the better.
Right. In fact, this actually links back to a question which I skipped earlier, but I actually want to go back to it now, from Marcus in the Czech Republic. And he says, what's your view on plain English and inclusive language in academic writings? It sort of links into what Alexander was just saying. Marcus says it's often recommended by universities, but at the same time, many academic journals still cling to a more old-fashioned style. How can we resolve this apparent conflict? I suppose the danger is that if we go too far towards plain English, then it's no longer classified as academic English. So, you know, where's the point? Yes, Hayo.
I think there's a difference between plain English and inclusive language.
Right.
And so being inclusive in your language, I think, is something that all journals currently advocate for and encourage and require in many cases. There is, of course, a continuum from highly specialized academic English to everyday plain English. I think the balance has shifted a little bit more to being more accepting of everyday English, especially as we see more qualitative research being published, where people talk about teachers and learners' experiences, where, of course, you want to have the teachers and learners' voices expressed, which are usually not expressed in highly specialized academic language. So I do think, you know, look out for journals that you enjoy reading yourself, where you feel that the language actually speaks to you. And if that is the case, then that will be a wonderful candidate to actually try and submit your own work to.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's shift for the last few minutes to giving feedback and monitoring. Dennis in Mexico, it's not really a question, it's a statement, but the question is about techniques for feedback in online sessions. In other words, how can we provide effective feedback in an online session? Anybody like to take that one? Yes, Leila.
Okay, I think Turnitin is an excellent tool for that. You can even record anything you want to tell them. They can hear a voice. You can write it down. You've got all means of correcting things. It's an excellent tool to work with online.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Dr. Mansour and then James. You're on mute, Dr. Mansour.
Sorry for that. Well, I just would say whatever the delivery mode is, be it online or face-to-face, I think to have a very constructive feedback given to students. It has to be linked to a preset criteria, evaluation criteria. So students know exactly what areas of strengths or weaknesses they need to work on and actually presuppose before doing the task required. As per the online practices and how to deliver like successful feedback giving experience, I would say, I mean, using all the methods that are available nowadays, either the MOOCs or Moodle or Blackboard or all those sort of things. All the language skills, not only the writing or the speaking. So it can be given to them using any method, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mansour. And James.
That's an excellent point, Dr. Mansour. Thank you. I just have to add about being clear about the expectations of what you're trying to do is if you share the rubric with the students before the assignment, they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And when you do give the feedback, you're using that rubric that they have access to. They can see where they have either done very well or need improvement on, things like that. Online, I do this through Moodle as well. I have mentioned that I do prefer getting my homework turned in through Moodle. But Moodle does have a comment function and a final comment after you submit the grade to the student. So you can have that back and forth before you give them a final grade through Moodle.
Right. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and Craig?
Yeah, I was just wanting to tease out something that Dr. Mansour said, and this idea of thinking carefully about the kind of feedback that you're going to give. I think one of the dangers of technology, it can kind of suck you into this idea of doing it quickly, doing it immediately. It's got to be now happening because it's all online and you know it's all terribly exciting. Whereas I think there is a lot to be said for actually sitting back and waiting and actually thinking, okay, I've got all these kinds of bits of language that I could give feedback on, but really what is the priority here in terms of my learners' needs? And I think that, you know, in amongst all the apps and technology and things like that, it would be a shame to lose that aspect of giving feedback to students where you're actually looking carefully at the language that they're producing and making very good decisions on what their needs are and prioritizing what feedback that you do give to students, because that's going to be far more valuable than any kind of app that you might put on with your lesson or with your learner group.
Okay, and just one other question on feedback. This is from Angelina in Russia. She asks if it's actually helpful or is it even harmful to evaluate students almost every lesson. I guess that depends a lot on how many students you've got. If it's just a small number, then you're probably doing it anyway. But yeah, so that's the question. Is it helpful or harmful to evaluate students almost every lesson? Alexander, then Craig, and then Hayo.
Sure. So, and really for this question, it really depends what we mean by assessing students. So if there's some formative assessment and they're getting feedback, sure, that can be great. If it's something, if you're quizzing them every time, I mean, really, I would take a step back and look at how much of your time are you spending on assessment versus teaching. If what you're doing as assessment is part of your teaching, if it's kind of assessment for learning, sure. But I would be that sounds like a lot, right? Unless what you mean is there's some kind of minimal way that you're giving them some kind of feedback, which can be positive.
Okay, Craig?
To my mind, evaluation of students is just an occupational hazard. I mean, as teachers, I don't think we can help ourselves, basically. So the issue here is, I'm doing it all the time, and I think that teachers do it all the time. As soon as you step into a teaching space, you start evaluating, oh, you know, they didn't do that well, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's fine to evaluate students. You can't not in many ways. But I think the key issue here is what you choose to tell students of your evaluation and the way in which you do that. So I think a good thing to do is kind of to systematize feedback. And I mean, on an EAP course, if you're giving learners kind of feedback on a regular basis, like every month or every 6 weeks, depending on the frequency of study, and that you're not only giving them feedback and evaluating them, but also giving them learning goals so that you can actually refer to those the next time that you meet. I think that is the key thing. It's not the evaluation that's bad, it's how you manage it as a teacher.
Okay, thank you, Craig. And Hayo, I think you wanted to say something.
Yes, I completely agree with what Craig just said. One thing to be mindful of is that the research is very clear. When you ask learners what they want, they're absolutely adamant that they want feedback. Yeah. Not necessarily tests and exams, but they want feedback. And they want it frequently, they want it consistently, they want it constructively, they want it positively. And so I think one of the lessons from the last 18 months is that technology can indeed enable us to provide feedback in a very large range of ways that perhaps previously in traditional face-to-face classrooms we didn't use. And so I think there is a very, shall we say, positive outlook for teachers in the range of tools that we have available to us now to provide our learners with what they are looking for, and that is consistent, regular feedback from us.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
End at this point, Peter.
Can I just ask one more question, Simon?
Yeah, quick.
Okay, very, very quickly. Can anybody tell us some useful resources to learn more about academic English? From Dana in Mexico. Who knows some useful resources?
There's endless resources. I mean, just go to Amazon. Just go to Amazon Books and Google English for Academic Purposes. There's a whole range of reference books. So there are reference books which talk about EAP, but also look at course books, a range of course books. And there are lots of online resources available. There's the British Association of Lecturers of EAP is a very useful website. So there's a whole raft of stuff that you can get there. You just have to go look.
Yeah. Maybe the panelists could write something while I wrap up in the last minute. If they want to write any comments in the chat box about things they recommend.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, thanks everybody. Back to Simon.
Thanks so much.